are increasingly starting to see human resources as the most important source of competitive advantage. All right, so this is something that you will hear time and again throughout throughout this course, that today organizations view their people as the most important source of competitive advantage. So, if that is the case, clearly it is indispensable that you know how to manage those people well. All right. So, there has been a change in the entire philosophy of human resource management. Previously, I mean, in the earlier years, you would hear human resources being termed as labor. Then came a change where human resources were called staff. Then human resources were called personnel. And finally, now we talk as human resources or as talent. All right. So human resource management and talent management, these are terms that are used almost synonymously. So this is not really a historical perspective, but rather this is to familiarize you with the idea that from a point in time where we talked about our people simply as labor, and we saw it as just another resource like land, labor, and capital. Labor was one of the three resources that are needed for any production or any service to be delivered. Now we talk about people as human resources. Sometimes we also talk about them, refer to our human resources as talent. So that means what? There is a move towards the term human resource management itself means that there is a more humane approach towards the management of the people in an organization. There is a recognition of the fact that these people are not the same as land or capital. They are human and therefore they have to be managed accordingly. And that is why, irrespective of whether you do work in the human resource management function or whether you work in any department of any organization, you have to have a grip on how you are going to manage your human resources effectively. Because remember, when we define management itself, we say that it is the art of getting things done with and through others. All right. So that means what? That without your people, you can do nothing. So if you need your people to achieve each and every objective, if you need your people to achieve each and every objective that you better do a good job of managing your people, and that is what this course is going to be about. All right, so the basic text that we are going to follow is Human Resource Management by Gary Dessler. Someone told me that the 16th edition is out now, so we will be following the 16th edition if that is the latest one available, although it's 14th edition here. But if the 16th edition is out, then we will definitely be following the latest version. All right, and we have two reference texts that are mentioned here. For the first one, I will give you handouts when required. The second one, you can actually access the entire book online through McGraw-Hill Express Library. Okay, so this is something that I would mail you about also shortly. I would mail the CRs that we have acquired access to quite a number of books under McGraw-Hill Express Library, and this is one of those books. So we will be referring to this book quite a number of times in this course, and when we do, you are going to be able to access that book online. I will give you the required credentials as well for that. We have the tentative course plan here, and basically this course is going to be about all the steps in the human resource management process. So when we go into the slides for today, you will see that there are several distinct but interrelated steps in the human resource management process. So after the introduction, each chapter that we do is going to be about one of those steps. So for example, the second chapter is going to be about job analysis. The next chapter is going to be about recruitment, etc. So as we go along, we will be covering another step, an additional step of the human resource management process, so that by the end of the course, you have a thorough and complete understanding of what the entire process looks like. All right. This is the assessment plan, and this is tentative. Why it is tentative? Because the you might have more, you and not might, you will have more presentations this semester. All right, and so what how this will work is that instead of giving one presentation on your term paper, you will be doing presentations in in very frequently throughout the course. All right, so once we have done a particular topic, I will assign two groups, for example, to do a presentation on that topic, and so on and so forth. So for each topic that we cover, there will be a number of group presentations that will be assigned. So because we will be doing more presentations, the percentage allocated to presentation might go up, but that is not something you need to worry about right now. This, for the time being, this will suffice as the tentative assessment plan. The general guidelines are something that you are already familiar with, so I'm not going to go into that. But one thing that is mandatory this semester is to keep your videos activated throughout the class, and not only when you are giving your attendance. If at any point in time your videos are not active, then you are not present as far as I'm concerned, because I have no way on earth to know what you are doing while your videos are not active. Okay, so this is a formal class. The faculty has the video on, so you must have the video on. If you were not prepared today to have your videos on for this single class, I can excuse you, but from next class onwards, there is no excuse for keeping your videos deactivated. All right, so this is a ground rule for this particular semester, and you must remember that. The second thing is that this is also something that has been decided at the university level, that even though we are conducting our lectures online and we might be doing our quizzes and presentations online, the final examination and the midterm examination will be conducted physically at IBA on campus. All right, so this is something that is relevant to those who live outside Dhaka. I'm not sure if there are people living outside Dhaka here, but if there are, please make sure that you have the academic calendar, and please make sure that you know when the midterm week is, because you will need to travel to Dhaka and take the midterm on campus. So you must make your plans accordingly. I'm not sure whether all the faculties will be taking midterms, but I definitely will take my midterm and I will take it on campus. So that is also something you should be prepared for. All right, all protocols will be maintained. You don't need to worry about that, but you will have to go and give the exam on campus. All right, so these are the two things that you should bear in mind. All right, so now we'll just dive into our lecture. But before we do that, let me just quickly take your attendance, and then we will start our lecture. Okay, Rosa Shawal.
Present, ma'am.
Mehdi Hassan.
Present, ma'am.
Rafid Fayaz.
Present, ma'am.
Aryan Mehjabin.
Present, ma'am.
Adman Saqib.
Present, ma'am.
Abra Rohin. Abi Rashad.
Present, miss.
Rafi Dana. Shishu Rohan Roy.
Present, ma'am.
Isha Rahman.
Present, miss.
Shamsuddin.
Present, ma'am.
Ryan Ahmed.
Present, miss.
Mashrif Hassan.
Present, ma'am.
Samir Mustafa.
Present, miss.
Amir Hamza.
Present, miss.
Swapnil Hassan.
Yes, ma'am.
Muazzem Hussain.
Present, ma'am.
Irtifa Ryan.
Present, ma'am.
Asif Raihan.
Present, ma'am.
Alfi Sharier. Tawfiqul Huda.
Present, ma'am.
Akramuzzaman.
Present, ma'am.
Zinat Maliha.
Present, miss.
Shomen Borua.
Present, miss.
Lubab bin Abdullah.
Present, miss.
Rafika Islam.
Miss, she got disconnected. She's joining.
Okay, Rezwanul Islam.
Present, ma'am.
Arabi Mifta. Sohrab Hussain.
Present, ma'am.
Raisa Mehjabin.
Yes, miss.
Mohammad Zabir.
Yes, miss. Present.
Adib Mahmood.
Present, miss.
Present. Abrar is present. Just a minute. Yeah. Mastura Mahbub.
Present, miss.
Rifa Nawar.
Present, miss.
Raisa Fatima.
Present, miss.
Zayan Mubashira.
Miss, network issues.
Okay, Umar Pathan.
Present, miss.
Maliha Islam.
Present, miss.
Dhabi Binte Farid. Anadil.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Anadil Maisha.
Yes, ma'am.
Nafisa Kubir.
Present, miss.
Sia Mahbub,
Present, Miss.
Naveed Hassan, Mustafa Amir,
Present, ma'am. Naviz Hassan, present, ma'am.
okay, Mustafa Amir, Asif Moin,
Present, Miss. Miss Mustafa Hamid present. I was having issues.
okay, Asif Moin is here, Shapu
Yes, ma'am.
Shamim,
Present, ma'am.
Benzi Tanha,
Present, ma'am.
Arno Wazab,
Present, ma'am.
Utshab Chakma,
Present, ma'am.
Maliha Mumtaz,
Yes, miss.
Riddonobi,
Present, Miss.
Farhan Ishra,
Present, ma'am.
Junaidur Rahman.
Present, ma'am.
Okay, so just a minute, Abrar is here and who else? Salman Sakib. Salman, I did give your attendance also. All right, okay, so let us dive into the lecture now. Okay, so this today and the next 2 days probably are going to be about the introduction to human resource management. So some of the concepts that we will discuss today are things that we will repeat again and again and again. All right, because today we are going to what today is about is taking a bird's eye view of the human resource management process so that you know what it is all about, what are the different components. But of course, we will be going deeper into each and every component in each subsequent chapter. So whatever we talk about today, this is just the introduction. This is just to familiarize you with the world of HRM, but you don't need to understand each and every process in detail at the moment. All right. So at this point, a general understanding is sought or is required of you. The deeper understanding will come as we go into the later chapters. So first up, we have a definition which says that human resource management is the process of acquiring, training, appraising, and compensating employees and of attending to their labor relations, health and safety, and fairness concerns. So this is a fairly long definition, and the reason why this is so is because this is not really a definition per se, but rather this is a description of what the HRM process is about. All right, because you can't really define HRM like this. You can only say what are the components that make this up. All right, so if we look at the terms one by one, it becomes very easy to understand. So first up, we have it is the process of acquiring people. So what do we mean by acquiring people? Clearly, if you were to start a business, you would need to get people on board, right? So you would want a certain number of people and a certain type of people with certain degrees, qualifications, skills, expertise, etc. to be on board. Because unless you have people, you can't get anything done. So that is what is acquiring is about. It is about getting people on board in the quantity and of the quality that you require to fulfill your organization's objectives. So that is acquiring. Then comes training. So once you have gotten people on board, you need to make sure that their skills and abilities match your requirements. All right. So you might have gotten very talented or very competent people on board, but that does not ensure that they know exactly what to do to get the job done at your organization. Because each organization has its own way of getting things done. Each organization has its own modus operandi. Each organization has its own expectations. So once you have gotten people on board, you need to train them to make sure that their skills and that skills and abilities match your expectations and the requirements of their job. So you have acquired people, you have trained them. Now comes appraising. So what do we mean by appraise? You definitely want to keep a tab on how well your people are doing, or if indeed they are fulfilling the expectations that you have from them. So how do you do that? You need to assess them. You need to evaluate their performance. All right. And evaluating their performance is the only way by which you can make sure that they improve. Because unless you are evaluating people, you don't know where they are at right now. So if you don't know the baseline, you can't go for improvement either. So you acquire people, you train them, then you appraise or evaluate how well they are performing. So that is the another part. And then comes compensating. So compensation is a broad term. It includes anything and everything to do with paying employees for the work that they do. Once again, compensation is a broad umbrella term. that includes all sorts of payments that you make to your employees. All right. So obviously, people come to work because they expect to be paid in return, and therefore, compensation is a very critical aspect of human resource management. So we will look into compensation much later after the midterm actually. But for now, remember two things that a compensation structure always has to meet two criteria. Number one, it has to be equitable. All right. So if somebody is doing work of more importance or if somebody is contributing more to the organization, they need to be paid more. So a compensation structure has to be equitable. Simply put, it has to be fair. Because if a compensation structure is not fair, people are going to be dissatisfied. Remember equity theory that people expect to be paid in proportion to how much they are working, in proportion to how much they are contributing to your organization. So a compensation structure has to be first and foremost equitable. At the same time, it has to be competitive. So, what do we mean by competitive? We mean that at any point in time, you are not the only organization who is trying to attract people, right? There are your competitors as well. There are other people in the market who are also trying to attract the same talent pool. So, if you have to attract them instead of your competitors, or if you want to make sure that you get the employees that you want ahead of your competitors, you need to make sure that your compensation structure is attractive, which in formal terms we say that your compensation structure is competitive. All right. So basically, once again, if we look at the four terms that we have looked at, very simply, human resource management is the process through which you get people on board to work for your organization. Then you train them to make sure that their skills and abilities match your requirements. You assess how well they are doing, and you pay them for the work that they do. Very simple. Okay. At the same time, we are also talking of attending to their labor relations, health and safety, and fairness concerns. So once people are part of your organization, you definitely have to look after them. Only they are not going to work for you. Remember the psychological contract that we talked about in OB quite a bit. So, as part of the psychological contract, at the very least, you have to ensure the health and safety of your employees. Also today, you also have to, yeah. So health and safety is a bare minimum that you have to ensure in the workplace. You have to address any grievances that they may have regarding fairness or any other issue. And definitely you have to attend to what we call labor relations requirements. So labor relations is a bit obsolete as a term. It was there in the definition. That's why I put it up. But typically today we say employee relations rather than labor relations. So under employee relations, we have anything and everything that you do to maintain a positive symbiotic relationship with your employees. So for example, if one of your employees is having trouble, let's say adjusting, let's say one of your employees who is new to the workplace is having trouble adjusting with the workplace, it is the role of employee relations to help them to adjust. If one of your employees is having trouble, let's say fitting into a particular team, it is the role of employee relations to help them. If one of your employees is being subjected to bullying and victimization by the other colleagues, it is the role of employee relations to help them cope with that. All right. So employee relations encompasses anything and everything that you do to maintain positive employee relations, to develop or enhance the psychological contract with your employees. All right. So this is also something we will talk about quite a bit because this is one of the new areas of emphasis in HR. So we will also talk about that later. So before talking about the points that we have here, let me show you this pictorial summary of what HRM is about. And here basically once again you have the same things that we have talked about: talent acquisition, training and development, performance management. So in the previous slide, you saw appraisal. Here you are seeing performance management. How are they different? Performance appraisal and performance management are often used synonymously, but actually, performance management is a slightly broader term. So, under performance management, we don't just appraise people, we also look at things like goal setting, feedback, and such. So performance management under it, performance appraisal is the major thing, but there is also goal setting and feedback under that. Okay, so that is why here we are talking about the broader term, which is performance management. Then we have compensation management, which we have talked about very shortly. We also have motivation and maintenance. So what do we mean by maintenance? We mean that if people in our if the employees that we have hired and if the employees that we have trained, if they are doing a good job, we definitely want them to stay with our organization. We don't want them to leave. But to make sure that they stay with our organization, we have to do certain things. We have to make sure that they develop a sense of ownership towards our organization. We have to ensure that they feel motivated, that they feel safe and well cared for within the organization. So, all of the things that you do to keep your employees motivated and to make sure that you are taking care of them within the organization are part of motivation and maintenance. Okay. So sometimes to retain people within the organization, you might need to give them additional benefits. Sometimes to retain people within the organization, you might need to give them flexible working hours. So all of these things that you do to keep your people tied to your organization and to make sure that they don't end up leaving is part of maintenance. And lastly, we have compliance and employee relations. So compliance is basically the bare minimum. Okay, it is a legal requirement and you have to do it. So there are certain areas where HR has to abide by compliance. For example, there are certain rules regarding the health and safety requirements of the workplace. If you are operating a factory, for example, there are certain safety protocols that you have to follow. So what are those safety protocols? HR has to make sure that those are followed. If, for example, then there are certain equal employment opportunity legislations that there has to be a certain level of diversity within your workplace in terms of age, in terms of gender, in terms of ethnic groups, etc. So complying with those diversity requirements is also the part and parcel of HRM's responsibility. So that is compliance, basically following all law, rules and regulations or all laws and legislation regarding the human resources. How many days of leave is an employee entitled to? How much overtime pay is an employee entitled to? All of these are compliance issues that your organization, that your HR department needs to look after. And also we have employee relations, which we have just talked about, that whatever you do to build positive relationship with your employees is part of employee relations. And this is very much a part of HRM's function. All right. So this is a pictorial summary of what HRM is all about. And one thing that I would like to reiterate one more time is that here we are looking at each of these as separate segments, right? So we are seeing a talent acquisition is one segment, training and development is another segment. But I would like you to remember that at the end of the day, this is an integrated process and all of these things are interrelated. All right. So let's say, for example, once you are doing performance management or once you are doing performance appraisal, you might realize that there is something missing in your employees and that you need to train them in that particular area. So from performance management, you would go back to training and development, and then you would, again go for performance management. Or let's say, for example, when you are doing training and development, you might realize that there was something very wrong with your talent acquisition, meaning that you have ended up hiring people who do not have the basic skills to understand the training that you are giving them. So that means what? Next time when you go for your talent acquisition, you have to redesign that effort. All right. So although we are looking at it like this as a sequential process, it's not necessarily, unidirectional, and it is not segmented. It is all interconnected, and one process, the effectiveness of one process is clearly dependent on the other. Okay, so that is something we need to. Even compensation management. So, for example, if your salary structure is not enough, not attractive enough, then your talent acquisition is likely to fail. No matter how much money you spend on advertising, no matter how much money you spend on building up social media testimonials, if your salary is not attractive enough, which is compensation management, you simply cannot acquire the right kind of talent. So everything is interconnected, even though we are looking at it as segments, and we are looking at it in segments to facilitate our understanding, to facilitate going deeper into each topic. But when we have done all of it, hopefully, you can visualize it all as one integrated process. That is the objective at the end of the course. Okay, so if you have any questions at this point, you can ask before we proceed further. Okay, so if you don't have questions, let me just tell you that then after this particular slide, we have these two slides which are talking about the key HR functions. But I am not going over these slides because this is simply repeating what I just discussed. Okay, so here we have short descriptions of the different functions, all right? And that is something that was summarized here as well as in whatever I say. So you can read these on your own. I'm sure you won't have trouble understanding. Now, let me go back to the first slide. And here we have three additional points which are important to understand. And we are talking about the HR manager's distinct functions. Okay, so we are saying that the HR manager has a line function, a staff function, and a coordinative function. So let me first tell you that the term function, as we are using it here, does not mean responsibility. Rather, it is referring to authority. Okay, so we are saying that what sort of authority does the HR manager have? So the HR manager has three types of authority. Now, I'm not sure if you remember or if you understand the difference between line authority and staff authority, but assuming that you don't know, I'm just repeating that line authority is basically direct authority. All right. So, for example, if you are the sales manager, you have line authority over the sales executives. What does that mean? That you are superior in hierarchy to the sales executives. As the sales manager, you are superior in hierarchy to the sales executives, and therefore you have every right to expect that they will comply with your orders. So that is line authority. When you can expect compliance from other people with your orders or with your instructions, that is line authority. Okay. So every line manager has line authority over people working under him or her. That is how the term line manager came to be. This is different from staff authority. Staff authority is where you can provide advice and support, but you can't expect compliance in return. You can advise people on what to do, but you cannot expect that they will always listen to your advice. So that is staff authority. Okay. So within the organization, the HR manager is distinct because the HR manager has a lot of staff authority. What does that mean? That basically means that the HR manager has the right to advise as well as the responsibility to support all the other departments. So, for example, if the marketing department needs a fresh bunch of people, who is going to support them and advise them on how to carry out that recruitment? It is HR. Let's say if the finance department needs to design a training for its people, who is going to advise them on how the training should be done? It is HR. So HR has an advisory role or fulfills an advisory role for all the other departments, but that does not mean that HR has authority over all the other departments. All right, so that is something you should understand, that being able to advise someone is not the same as having the authority to expect compliance from them. Okay, so HR can play a supportive or an advisory role to all the other departments, but that does not mean that HR has direct authority over all the other departments. But within the HR department itself, definitely the HR manager does have line authority. So if under the HR manager, there is a recruitment manager, there is a training manager, there is a compensation manager, the HR manager will have direct line authority over these people. But the main source of the HR managers or the HR department's authority is staff authority because it is far reaching and it encompasses the entire organization. Is that clear to everyone? Do you have any questions at this point?
Miss, can you repeat the example of how like the HR manager has staff authority over other departments?
Okay, so basically, whenever any department needs to carry out any people-oriented function, like for example, any department needs to recruit a fresh bunch of people, they will do it based on the support and advice from HR. Okay, so that is how whatever any other department is doing, that is something that kind of authority is something that, for example, the marketing department does not have. All right, so the marketing department's authority is restricted to the marketing department itself. But when we talk about HR and also when we talk about the legal department, their authority is more spread out because they have to advise and support each and every other department within the organization. So that is what staff authority is. But once again, that does not mean that if the HR manager is saying that the recruitment is it should be conducted in a certain way, the departmental managers have to comply with that advice. They don't always have to comply. They may or may not take that advice, which is why it is distinct from line authority. If it were line authority, anything HR managers say, the other departments would have to comply. But the HR department does not have line authority outside of its own domain. Within the HR department, the HR manager has line authority. Outside the HR department, the HR manager as well as the entire HR team, they have staff authority, meaning they can always advise, they can support, but they cannot always expect compliance. That is the idea. Okay. At the same time, HR also plays a coordination, meaning that it ensures that everyone is adhering to organizational policies and procedures. Now, why is this important? It is important in the absence of a single, the HR department is that department which oversees that policies are being followed in a uniform manner. Because in the absence of such uniformity, different departments might end up devising their own rules and regulations. And that can create problems for the organization. But because in an organization, there will always be some policies that apply to everyone. Policies regarding office time, policies regarding overtime pay, policies regarding how many days of leave you are entitled to, policies regarding how you are supposed to be punished in the event that you end up abusing one of your co-workers. So all of these things have to be uniformly maintained, and HR is responsible for the maintained uniformity. Now, of course, the extent to which HR can make decisions is something that will depend on the sensitive matter. So, for example, let's say if the organizational policy is that anybody who comes, anybody who is absent than 3 days a month should have a reduction in their salary, or a salary, not a reduction in their salary, a salary adjustment for that particular month. Okay, so let's say if you are absent on work on more than 3 days, you have, let's say, 2% of your salary deducted for that month. So if that policy is in place, HR has every right under the coordinative function to deduct 2% of that employee's salary. But what about something more sensitive? Let's say somebody has, as I was saying, that an employee has abused one of his or her teammates. So who will decide what is the punishment? Who has the coercive power in this case? So in this case, HR does not have all the coercive power. Rather, it will be the line manager of that employee along with HR. Together, they will collaborate and decide what is the punishment that should be given to that individual. All right. So it depends on the sensitivity of the matter, how much decision making power HR has, where the implementation of policies are concerned. But when it comes to routine matters such as attendance, leave, pay, etc., these things are administered by HR on a day-to-day basis. And it is important for HR to do this so that there is uniformity regarding the application of these policies. That is the idea. Okay, if you have any questions at this point, go ahead. Otherwise, we carry on. All right, so these slides we have covered through our discussion. Now, why HRM is critical? That is something I would like to ask you. So by now, you have some idea of what HRM is and what it does. So now I would like to ask the class, you can raise your hands that why do you think HRM is so critical? Your ideas. You can raise your hands and then I'll come to you one by one. Okay. Okay, or I can just ask you that I can do.
Miss, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Miss, basically, coordinative power is basically a combination between line authority and staff authority.
We shouldn't call it a combination because line authority has its own definition, staff authority has its own definition. Coordinative authority is not, I mean, it's called coordinative function rather than coordinative authority. And it's not really a blend of these two. It is basically the function of making sure that policies are followed uniformly. So there, I don't think we should see it as somewhere between line and staff authority. This is distinct. It is something that is on its own. Okay.
So Miss, is line authority only because of hierarchy and the power to punish?
Line authority is primarily due to hierarchy, and it is also associated with reward power and coercive power, both. Okay. But staff authority does not come, I mean, the HR manager is not above the marketing manager, for example. They are at the same level. But the HR manager can advise the marketing manager, number one. So that is the staff authority aspect. Also, you can visualize that the HR manager has no reward power or no coercive power over the marketing manager. But the HR manager does have reward and coercive power as far as the people within his or her own department are concerned. So that is how line and staff authority are different. Yeah?
Okay, Miss.
Okay. All right. So somebody raised their hand. Yeah, Rifa, go ahead.
Basically, HRM is important because it helps to effectively manage the people of an organization as well as closing the gap that is created between an employee's performance and the strategic objectives and goals that an organization has.
Absolutely. Correct. Yes. Ravi?
Yes, ma'am. What would the HR manager be able to do under the circumstance if he's providing advice to a marketing manager and suppose the marketing manager is engaging in some unethical practice?
Yeah.
So even if that marketing manager does not heed the HR manager's advice, what is the action or what should the HR manager do under that circumstance?
Right. Okay. So ethics being a gray area is something. So let's reformulate your question with an example that let's say in the recruitment effort, okay, there are certain do's and don'ts as far as advertising or the posting the vacancy is concerned. So for example, you can't really post non-job related requirements on an advertisement. So for example, you can stipulate that the candidate should be of a particular gender as long as gender has nothing to do with the performance itself. Now let's say the HR manager has advised the marketing manager not to do that and the marketing manager nonetheless ends up doing it. So what would be the recourse? The recourse would probably, I mean, the HR manager cannot do anything directly. Okay. What the HR manager can do is the HR manager can bring this particular departure or deviation to the notice of top management, because at the end of the day, the job advertisement is something that impacts the organization as a whole. So if the marketing manager is not complying in an area which has potential legal implications as well, then the HR manager can take it up to the top management and they can address it as they choose to.
All right,
in the event that it is something less, what should I say, that it does not have a legal ramification but it falls in an ethical gray zone, The HR manager may not always do something about it, all right? Because ethics is something that can always be interpreted differently by different people. But as long as it can have legal ramifications, it would be wise and it would be, advisable for the HR manager to take it to a higher level in the hierarchy, because at the end of the day, it can impact the organization as a whole. Yeah, so that would be the answer.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so coming to why HR is critical, these are things that most of these things we have already discussed. So, of course, it's critical because it ensures that the organization is staffed with the right people. Because unless you have the right people on board, you can't. You can't expect to get results out of them. Then, as Rifa put it very correctly, that ensures that the gap between the skills that the people have and the skills that you are expecting from them, that is closed up. It helps keep employees motivated and committed towards organizational goals. So that is also something. So this is a bit distinct from the traditional view of HR, because we will look at that again. That in the traditional view of HR, the focus would be on helping the, HR's role would be to help the organization achieve its objectives, or to get the people to do what is required to get so that the organization can achieve its objectives. But now that we talk more about contemporary HR or strategic HR, the focus is equally on helping people achieve their objectives as well. So not only do you want the employer-employee relationship to be mutually beneficial. The organization should be able to get what it wants from its people. The people should also be able to get back what they want from the organization. Because at the end of the day, if they don't, they are not going to stay with you in the long haul. So that is something where HR also needs to play a role. Because today we say that line managers have wider spans of control, right? So line managers can't always keep a tab on the pulse of each and every employee. That is where HR also comes in, that from time to time you need to engage with the employees. You need to see where they are missing, let's say, a connection with the organization. What do they want so that they are more motivated? So doing those things, organizing those focus group discussions, doing those opinion surveys, doing those, let's say, one-on-one conversations with an employee who seems to be not performing well, that is also part of HR's responsibility. Because at the end of the day, employees should also be able to get what they want from the organization, not just in terms of compensation, but also in terms of career growth and learning. Okay, they should be able to grow with the organization. Helps ensure equitable and competitive compensation. That is something we have talked about. Safeguards the organization from legal complexity. So once again, there are there are lots of laws in the area of HRM. Labor law itself is a separate course, or it's a separate not just a course, it's a separate discipline altogether. So there are people within the HR department need to be conversant with the labor laws that are applicable to their area, and they need to advise the organization accordingly. And lastly, helping to ensure a return on HR investment. So this is a point we will come back to shortly, how to ensure a return on HR investment. But let me first take you to this particular slide, where we are talking about the difference between traditional HRM and strategic HRM. So you will hear throughout this course and later as well as you go into work life that today HRM is talked of. We take a more strategic view of HRM than we used to previously. All right. There was a time when HRM was equated with administration. Okay. When HR managers' functions were simply to recruit people, to fire people, hire and fire. Okay. HR's primary function was seen as to be hiring and firing. But now HRM is not so much about those administrative roles as it is about a more strategic role. So, what do we mean by that? So, by that we mean that while HRM was once considered to be the role of specialists, it is now considered to be the role of each and every line manager. Okay, each and every line manager must understand what HRM is about. Then comes the objective. So this is something that I've already said, that previously it was only about getting better performance out of your employees for the sake of the organization. Now it is also about understanding what employees want and catering to that better while parallelly fulfilling the organization's objectives. So you have to do both. The third point is very, very important, where it says that previously HR played a reactive role. So, what do we mean by that? It is like there is a vacancy, it needs to be filled, so HR gets on board. There is a complaint, there is a grievance, it needs to be resolved, HR gets on board. Then, this particular department needs training, HR gets on board. So, that it would be a reactive process, all right? But now, HR must be proactive and HR must take a long term view. So, for example, if this is the growth plan of my organization 5 years down the line, today I need to start recruiting people who can, who can match that growth plan. Okay. If, for example, I am expecting more people of Generation Z to enter my organization 5 years down the line, today, as the HR manager, I need to make policies that are going to be conducive to hiring people of Gen Z. Okay, so HR has to take a more long-term strategic view. So it's not like today there is a vacancy, tomorrow I throw in an advertisement and my job is done. No, that is how HR, or that is what HR did before. But now HR needs to plan ahead. HR needs to be more strategic. What kind of people do I need? What kind of policies do I need for those people? Let's say even for training, that training, it should not be done on an ad hoc basis. It should be more anticipative. Okay. So these are the things that HR needs to do today. Okay. Distinct from how it used to do things before. Then the culture. So, like every other department, today's HR departments are more open, more empowered, more participative. The major emphasis previously was on following the rules. So, let's say somebody has broken a rule there, somebody is not coming on time, somebody went on leave without informing us. That was the focus of HR. But now, HR is about developing people so that they help the organization grow, and at the same time they can also grow themselves. That is also important. All right, so you can start to see, at this point in time it may not be easy to visualize all of this because you are just starting to get familiarized with the different areas of HR, but it should at least give you some idea about how the orientation and philosophy is changing. Most importantly, to put it in a nutshell, HR should not be only about administration, it should also be about strategic planning, number one. Number two, HR should not only be about the short term, it should be as much about the long term as are the other departments of the organization. Number three, HR should not be responsive or reactive, it should be proactive. So there is a lot of emphasis on planning ahead, on doing things ahead, on anticipating what is going to be needed, what sort of human resources your organization is going to need in the future, and what those human resources are going to expect from your organization. So, for example, if you are expecting to hire more people of Gen Z is basically your generation. Okay. So, more people of Gen Z, they have characteristics different from the other generations. They want more flexibility, for instance. So if you hire Gen Z and then you go for offering flexibility, that is going to disrupt things. If you are going to hire Gen Z people 5 years from today, you need to start planning and adjusting your policies from now for that. So that is the kind of thing that HR needs to be doing. Okay, so that is what we are talking about. Any questions till this point? I'll go to the last point, which is accountability later. But if you have questions at this point, you can ask. All right. So, lastly, this is a very important point, and that is why I wanted to deal with it separately. That previously, HR was seen as a cost center, meaning that it is a unit of the organization which only incurs cost, but it does not produce any revenue. Okay. Unlike marketing, for example, which is a profit center, because while it incurs costs, it also generates revenue, which at the end of the day gets translated into profit. Now, why do you think HR was traditionally seen as a cost center? First of all, let us try to answer that. Why do you think HR was traditionally seen as a cost center?
May I answer?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Because there is no way to quantify how much your labor have improved.
Yes. Not just how much your employees have improved, but also there is no way to quantify the return on most of the investments that you make in HR, right? So that is what people thought before, that this is non-quantifiable, and therefore, because it is non-quantifiable and non-monetary in nature, that means there is no return. But that is absolutely a misconception. All right, so why is it a misconception? Because let us take two examples. First of all, uh, let us say that HR does an employee attitude survey, all right? And based on the employee attitude survey, HR is able to recognize a few critical areas that need intervention. And let's say that intervention is done, and 1 year later, when the employee attitude survey is repeated, there is a major improvement. Now, this improvement may not be monetary, but nonetheless, it is quantifiable. So if your employee satisfaction score has gone up from, let's say, 6.5 out of 10 to 8 out of 10, that is a return that may not be monetary in nature, but it is definitely quantifiable. So that is one thing. The other thing is that there are also ways to monetize this improvement. For example, if less people are leaving your organization as a result of the interventions that you have made, okay, as a result of the changes that you have made. Less people leaving the organization means less turnover. Less turnover means less need to hire new people. So if there is less need to hire new people, you are spending less money on new recruitment. One of the most expensive areas for a business is the recruitment and selection process. So if less people are leaving your organization as a result of improvement in employee satisfaction, clearly there is a cost saving here. And that cost saving is the return generated by HR. Okay, so I hope that is clear to everyone. If it is not clear, you can ask again. But the point is that previously we thought we had two misconceptions. First misconception is that something that cannot be monetized is not a return, which is not correct, because improvement in employee satisfaction is definitely a return. It may not be monetized, but it is clearly quantifiable. You have your employee rating scores there, you have your employee satisfaction scores there. If you want, you can even take your customer satisfaction scores, because if your employees are more satisfied, they are supposed to serve your customers better, and so your customer satisfaction scores should also increase. So all these things clearly matter, and therefore these are returns. Also, sometimes indirectly the returns from HR can be monetized. So for example, if as a result of more effective human resource management, you are having less turnover, that means you are spending less money on new recruitment, and therefore that is a cost saving that is attributable to HR. So that is definitely a return on HR investment. Okay, so the point is that previously HR was seen as a cost center, and that is why it was relegated to a sort of inferior role compared to other departments. But now people realize that HR is as much a profit center as any other department. All right, so there are different ways to quantify the return on HR investment. I'll just take you there. The ordering of the slides is not exactly in line with the way I'm taking the lecture, but it's fine. We are going to cover all of these anyways. Okay. All right, Lubab, first say you want to study less. Unfortunately, no, because you are now not children anymore. You have grown up, right? You have already spent 1 year at IBA, so you're grown up enough to study equally in all classes. All right, so these are some of the parameters for measuring HR effectiveness. What, for example, what is the response rate on your vacancy notices? Okay, so if your HR department is doing a better job, you are supposed to get a better response rate on your job advertisements. Okay, what is your attrition level, what is your grievance handling rate, what are the ratios. So here also we have some other parameters like what is the ratio of HR cost to total cost. So out of the total cost of your organization, how much money are you spending on the on HR related expenses? Okay. So how do you know what is a good number? Let's say I find out that on my recruitment, training, and such other processes, I am spending on average 10% of my total cost. Okay. How do I know if it is good? Is 10% good, bad? I mean, how do we know? So, what do? You benchmark. So, you find out how much your peers are spending on HR compared to you, and then you compare that with what type of talent you are able to attract compared to them. So, if you are spending, let's say, 20% of your total money on HR, but you are not being able to, where your competitors are spending only 10%, and nonetheless you are not being able to attract the same kind of talent that they are being to attract, then you are seriously making a mistake somewhere. On the other hand, if you are spending 10% of your total budget on HR related expenses and your competitors are spending similar amounts and you are happy with the kind of talent that you are attracting, then it's fine. Okay, so there are different metrics that you can use to gauge how well your HR department is doing, and therefore there is no need to treat HR purely as a cost center. It is possible to monetize, it is possible to quantify at least, if not monetize, and therefore HR must be treated as much as a profit center as any other department. Because at the end of the day, your people are producing all the returns that your business is getting. So there's no reason why you should relegate HR to simply a cost center. Yeah. Okay. Any questions at this point?
Ma'am, what are attrition levels?
Attrition levels is basically turnover rate, the same thing.
Oh, okay.
The rate at which people are leaving your organization. Okay, so we are more or less done for today. Just two quick points. This is not really, nothing new, but just familiarizing you that typically how is an HR department structured? Okay, or what is the traditional structure of the HR department? So under the HR department, you would expect to have a head of human resources. And under the head of human resources, you will have several different units. Like there might be a unit for talent acquisition, a unit for training and development, a unit for compensation and benefits, and so on and so forth. So that is the traditional structure. And even today, in many local organizations, you might find that there is no distinct HR department. Administration and HR are sort of cooped up into one team, but that number is reducing day by day. So, in more and more organizations, you will see there is at least a dedicated HR department, if not separate departments for each of these functions. All right, so that is something that you will see. But as the strategic focus of HRM is being more and more emphasized, organizations are realizing that HR managers actually spend a lot of time on activities that are less important. Okay, so for example, administration is perceived, is given a rating of most important by only 2% of HR managers approximately, but they end up spending 16% of their time on that activity. So there is clearly a mismatch here, right? Because what is more important is clearly what should be taking up more of your time. But that is not how it works, because so much of the HR manager's time is spent on administrative functions that less time is left for other more important functions such as strategic activities and training and development. So because of this, there has been a readjustment of the HR department structure, and more organizations today are structuring their HR department so that HR managers can focus on the more critical value added roles such as strategic activities, training and development, and such, and they have to focus less on administrative functions. Okay, So that is what we will look at in the next class, that what is a more contemporary structure of the HR department, which actually allows the HR manager to bother less about administrative functions. By administrative functions, I mean things such as keeping a tab on how many people are coming on time, who has gone on leave, who is up for a, let's say, I mean, such things, okay, such administrative, what sort of, who is up for, let's say, enrollment in the group insurance scheme, এই ধরনের অ্যাডমিনিস্ট্রেটিভ জিনিসগুলো বাদ দিয়ে, so that HR managers can focus more on the strategic aspects, like what sort of training and development do my people need, what sort of people do I need in the future, so that they can focus more on these. The structure of HR departments in many organizations is changing. So that is the structure we will look at in the next class. But this is just food for thought, so that you understand that HR managers are often bogged up so much in less value added activities that they don't really have time for those activities that are more important. Okay, yes, Luba?
Miss, how do you quantify the importance?
The importance of what?
The importance of a nature issue.
Okay, so this is something that was based on the manager's perception. So the managers were asked to rate what they perceive to the most important activity. Okay.
Miss, in terms of what?
In terms of how much value it can add to the organization, I would say.
Okay.
Okay, how much it can contribute to the overall objectives of the organization, most likely. Yeah. And time consuming is obviously how much time they spend on it. Yeah. Okay, so that is the point, and we'll carry on from here in the next class. We do have a few minutes left. If anybody has any questions, do go ahead and ask. Otherwise, we'll stop here. Okay, so while you are thinking of any questions, if you have any, let me tell you that before the next class, I would request the CRs to send me an updated group list, because as I said, we will be doing more presentations. Therefore, I need the group list sooner. So we are going to have 9 5-member groups and 2 4-member groups. Once again, for your section, 9 5-member groups and 2 4-member groups. So you make your groups accordingly and have your CRs send me that list.
Yes.
Another thing, yeah.
We have 55 students in our section.
But it says 53 here.
Miss roll number 3 and roll number 37. Shams Ishraq and Naushadul Islam Tamim. Miss, their names aren't present in the list. There might be some kind of glitch.
Okay.
I've talked to the office. They'll send you an updated list soon.
Okay, so if that is the case, we can have 11 5-member groups, and that simplifies things. All right, so that's okay. If it's an error, then it's fine. You can simply go ahead and form 5-member groups. Another thing that is not related to the course, but it's important from a personal point of view, is that I'm planning to do this research on a sort of how motivation impacts academic performance. And for that, I would need all of you to fill up a survey. Okay, so I will post it in Google Classroom sometime before the next class, and it's mandatory on each and every one of you to fill it up. It's not going to take much time. I think maybe 15 minutes at max. And so I'd like you to fill it up. Okay, so I'll post it and then I'll let the CRs know. Okay, so that's about it for today. I'm not going to post the slides today because I would like to sort of get a bit more ahead. I mean, complete these and then post in the classroom. So if you have any other questions, you can go ahead. Otherwise, we call the class to an end.
Ma'am, why did the chart say that 0% time is spent on strategy activities? Ma'am, you are muted.
Yeah. So this is basically one of the reasons why it does say that is basic. First of all, remember that this is basically what the managers were asked to say, how much time they spend on what, and that is what they say. Now, why did they say that? One of the reasons could be that this survey is a bit backdated. 2006 is like 15 years back. And 15 years back, nobody really expected HR managers to be so strategic. So that may be a reason why they could not sort of isolate Tara strategic activities and how much time they were spending. So that could be one reason, the fact that the survey is backdated. and it was not possible at that time for them to actually pinpoint they were spending a certain chunk of time to strategic activities. Also, I feel like that even if this is still relevant, because even if this survey were repeated today, I feel like the figure would not be much higher, because the main point of this table is to show you that while HR managers are so caught up in administrative and less value added tasks, they don't really get to spend enough time on strategic activities. Okay, so there is also a small case study that I can assign you to read, and that could help you to understand this very point. So I think I'll do that. So the point is, one reason, well pointed out, is that the survey is backdated. But even if it were repeated today, the figure may not be much higher, because the strategic expectation from HR managers is relatively new. And number two, they don't really have much time left after doing all of this for strategic activities. But that's not how it should be, given the importance placed on it. Yeah?
Yes, ma'am, got it.
Okay. All right. So thank you. We'll meet again on Thursday.
Miss,
Yep.
if you
Yes.
could take a note,
Yes.
Shams and Naushad, roll number 3 and 37, they are present in the class.
Okay. All right. Sure.
Okay, miss, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.